Welcome, everyone. I'm Dick Deming. I'm Medical Director of Mercy One Cancer Center and the founder of Above and Beyond Cancer. Welcome to our weekly cancer education series. It's brought to you in part by a grant from the Iowa Oncology Society. And my guest tonight is Julie Larson. Welcome, Julie. Julie is a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist, and she does mental health counseling for patients at the Mercy One Richard Deming Cancer Center, and for some of the Above and Beyond Cancer patients, and for people all over the country.
Yes.
Very experienced.
Yeah. Yes.
And before we talk about what we're going to talk about, let's get to know you then.
Okay.
Where
Sure.
are you from originally?
So I grew up in the Midwest. So being here in Iowa feels close to like my roots.
You were born where?
In Indiana.
Indiana.
But soon after I graduated from college, I went to Miami, Ohio for college, and then I went to New York City.
Okay.
And I lived
Tell me
in-
about Miami from Ohio.
Miami of Ohio.
Miami of Ohio.
Yeah, Miami University.
Why is it called Miami University in Ohio?
Well, we have T-shirts in our bookstore that say Miami was a university before Florida was a state.
Okay.
So
Is that an
it
Indian name?
Yes, it came from the Miami Indian tribe.
Okay, which
Yeah.
we're in Indiana.
Yeah.
I always wondered
Ohio.
about
Miami, Ohio is in
My-
Ohio. Yeah.
Ohio.
Yeah.
So that's where you went to undergrad.
That's where I did undergrad.
So when you started college,
Mhm.
what was your very first major you wrote down?
Psychology. So I was psychology and family
And you
studies.
stuck with that.
And then, yes, and I did that all through my 4 years. I thought I would go immediately to graduate school and go get my PhD and be a psychologist. But then I took a brief foray into the world of theater.
Oh, really?
So I didn't know if you knew that, but I have
No, I
a whole
didn't.
background.
So were you in theater in college?
I did not major in it, but I always tiptoed over to the theater.
Okay,
department.
back to high school.
Oh,
Were you on stage in high school?
Yeah.
What role are you most proud of from
Well,
high school theater?
Oh, high school theater, I don't know, but I went on and did Broadway tours, and I was in Marquette, and I did,
Really?
yes. So I did
Okay.
Broadway in New York. That's what took me to New York City.
And
And
you were a
then-
waitress as well?
Oh, of course, because that's part of the game, right? I waited tables for dinner. I worked at Banana Republic for wardrobe, and
And you were a Rockette.
yeah.
I did not know this about you.
Yes, so I did this whole fun, exciting young adult life post undergrad, but then at some point, I was like, I'd like to interview for a job and not wear a leotard.
Yeah,
And
I've
so
never done that.
I applied and I was accepted at Columbia University in Manhattan. And I went back to Columbia and got my master's degree. And then from then have done oncology supportive care since graduating from Columbia and love it, truly love
Wow.
it. So I have this deep passion for theater and music and the arts, very much is in my blood. But I really love what I do now and have done for the last over 20 years.
Right. So I would imagine, I'm a big fan of medical humanities or bringing humanities into the field of medicine.
Mm.
I know that my practice of oncology, that I'm a better cancer doctor because of my knowledge of theater, poetry, literature, philosophy, theology, and that those interests serve me better as a cancer doctor than if I had taken 5 more organic chemistry classes.
Well, and when I was in grad school at Columbia, I was part of a study of people who had been in performing arts that had shifted into like therapy-driven or support services. And the premise of the study was, hey, as an actor, I was always getting a script and learning the motivations and the lines of that particular character. And now as I sit in therapy, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm sitting across from somebody and I'm working very hard to understand them, not me, them. What is driving that worry? What is behind the fear? What is the loss? And why is that important? So in some ways it's character work, but it's in line,
right.
yeah. It's,
And also your acting studies certainly have a lot to do with empathy and understanding and relating in a way that's
Well, and I
empathetic
think-
and even compassionate.
probably for sure my capacity to be engaged with and build rapport. I also do a lot of speaking. So in addition to working clinically in my office individually with one-on-one with patients, I speak all over the country. And I do a lot of webinars. And I think that when I think about, oh my gosh, like just like the way your life weaves together in beautiful ways. I have a degree and I have 20 plus years of sitting with cancer patients. But I also have a talent and a skill of standing up in front of an audience. So I feel uniquely qualified to be of service in that way. And I speak quite often and am comfortable doing that. So I love that part of my job too.
Well,
Yeah.
it shows.
Yeah, me too.
So we're going to talk about a new program that we're launching that is a virtual, I don't know if we call it a support group, a classroom. How would you describe?
I call it a hybrid. So I do this group.
We're going to call it Let's Talk.
Let's Talk About It. And I
Let's
do
Talk
Let's
About
Talk About It for a couple of other organizations.
Okay.
So I'm excited that we get to do it for Giving Cancer.
So how would you describe the
I
program?
call Let's Talk About It to me has been incredibly successful in other places. And so it's exciting to bring it to this group of survivors. It is a hybrid between what you know and might really love about a support group. So the capacity to share and to bring forward what's happening in your own life, which I always feel as a facilitator of a support group, there's some great power in sitting back and letting the room love and care for each other. But it's also topic driven. So it's specific to a topic. And I think that sometimes that helps people feel a little bit more relaxed. That you know when you're going to come into this room, we're not like waiting for you to just bring something profound and important to say. We're going to be talking about, for instance, next week in August, our August group is going to be fear of recurrence. So I'm going to deliver some slides and some content and some strategies and tips about how we manage the emotions that come up around this concept of fear of recurrence, what we can do about it. And then I bounce back and forth in that room between the speaker screen and the Brady Bunch screen. So we all feel like we're together. And I say, hey, how is this hitting you? And you can interrupt me and you can unmute. And then that we kind of all talk together as a group. So it provides a really kind of very vibrant conversation, robust conversation where it's your personal stories connected to the education that I bring.
Right, and fear of recurrence is such a, well, it's universal, I would say, for patients going through cancer. And in many ways, it's a very intelligent response to
Yes.
the situation. That fear is not a bad thing when used appropriately. Fear says, hey, wake up, there's a danger here. Courage is how do you take this danger, use it as a source of creativity, ingenuity, to pay attention. Okay, I could have a recurrence. How do I take that knowledge and be alert? But yet, what happens when that fear kidnaps you and hijacks you?
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that. And that in some ways, when people ask me what I do, that's my whole role as a therapist, is that I feel our culture tends to lump feelings into good or bad, a problem or not a problem. And that's not the case. Feelings are feelings, and you serve a role.
And even anxiety is a word that, that in some situations, anxiety, like fear, might be based in reality, and your mind's telling you, pay attention. There's something you need to pay attention to, and then hopefully figure it out to use it in a useful way, as opposed to.
I would respond to it, not react. I would say that if you're, my job is to listen, and if your feelings are matching your circumstances, we're well within the range of normal. And so kind of, and then to what degree are you feeling those feelings? So where on the spectrum are we? So are the feelings matching the experience? Okay, that's where we're tracking. And are they in a range that feels manageable? Okay, if we're on either side of that, then we're gonna kind of plug in or look at it a little deeper. But yeah, feelings, if the sadness and the fear and the worry match the circumstance, then I'd be surprised if you weren't feeling that way.
So fear of recurrence is going to be the topic of the first one. Do you think that is fear of recurrence a type of anxiety?
Yeah, I think that fear of recurrence is a collection of feelings. Worry, it's uncertainty, it's grief, right? There's a lot about my life that has changed, and as I navigate post-treatment survivorship or ongoing management of a chronic or more advanced stage disease, I recognize, gosh, there are things that will never be the same. So there's grief in there.
Probably a bit of acceptance of mortality.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that before cancer, we all intellectually know, I don't know, did we learn at age 7 or age 10 that we're going to die? I mean, we all know by the time we get to be a teenager that we're going to die someday. And we all intellectually know that it may be before we're 85. But for most of our life, we just try to forget that until you hear the words, you have cancer, and then it's, oh my God, I am going to die.
Well, a sense of vulnerability. So there's another feeling, very vulnerable. I think many survivors talk about feeling isolated. So even though they're having these feelings and they may know that they're normal, they're the only one having them. Even their loved ones or their caregivers around them who care for them deeply and are supportive may not completely get it. How could they? So when you come into a group, you can find others who understand and meet you there.
Right. And so we use the term fear of recurrence for those folks who have been through cancer and they're cancer-free. But for someone living with incurable cancer, there's maybe we use the term fear of progression.
Exactly.
That we just, things are going okay. I'm peacefully coexisting with my cancer, but I know someday that's not going to happen. And we right here, right this minute, you and I have everything we need for perfect joy this minute. If we can forget about the regrets of yesterday and worrying about tomorrow, then how do you bring them to the here and now?
Thank you for saying that too, because I worry sometimes that our programming in cancer support sometimes doesn't always remember is the wrong word, but include or have as much programming for those who are dealing with advanced stage and ongoing cancer. So this, let's talk about it next Thursday, what is titled Fear of Recurrence / Progression. It will resonate for both.
Yes.
And so both types of survivors can find that space.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the next week, what's the
Can I use
topic?
my
You
sheet?
may use your
Cheat sheet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let me
You
see.
didn't memorize
So
your
I didn't memorize
lines?
it. One day at a time. I'm living in the moment.
Were you in one day at a time?
So,
You just did.
no soap operas. But okay, we're doing it monthly, the third Thursday of the month at noon. So
Okay,
that's
before we
something to
go
know.
into the next topic,
Yes.
let's talk about how people participate.
Okay,
So it's the third Monday,
third Thursday,
third Thursday,
THPH. Oh, that's easy.
third Thursday at noon.
At noon,
Okay.
and it will be online. It will be a remote offering, so we'll connect over Zoom link. You can register on you're gonna help me here, mercy.org/RDCC, or program?
Yes.
Okay, familiar with that? I think
So it's the Mercy One Richard Deming
yeah,
website.
yep.
And if you have any problem finding that website, you can always call 515-358-6606. That's the phone number for the Cancer Center, and get instructions specifically how to register.
And when you go to that registration link, all of the third Thursday of the month, let's talk about it, programs are all on the calendar. So you can pick and choose. You can kind of do a la carte. You can do, I like August, I like November, and I like this one, or you can just register for them all.
And they are complimentary, so no charge.
No charge. And then once we have our pool of registrants, we will send out the Zoom link for you to use on that day. And then there we will all be together. So you want to know topics?
Yes, topic number 2.
So managing the fear of recurrence progression is next Thursday, third Thursday of August. September is Survivor's Guilt.
Okay, before you tell me.
Yet
the
another
number,
bucket
let's
of
just talk a
feelings.
little bit about survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
So, survivor's guilt.
Complex. Okay.
Yeah, complex.
So
So
many
it probably takes obviously a while before survivor's guilt shows up. And I would imagine that part of that process is going through the cancer journey with others around you, and then learning that others around you did not fare as well as you did.
Yep, that is, I would call that like classic. The first way we think about it is when perhaps you're doing well in somebody that you went to treatment with is not faring as well, or is experiencing more side effects than you are, and you're not experiencing the same kind of side effects. I think there are many forms of survivor's guilt though. I think that whole concept of the pressure that we put on ourselves, am I doing enough? I just had this stop and smell the roses, wake up moment, get perspective, and now I'm back to Tuesday. And I feel guilty about the fact that I'm not using this wake up call in a more profound way. So there can be pressure that we put on ourselves, and that's hard to wrestle with. And that can be a form of survivor's guilt. I think another form of survivor's guilt can be maybe the pressure that other people put on us, that, well, are you eating this? Are you doing this? Are you taking advantage of all these other things? And you're like, I'm just kind of working to get back to like my favorite TV show on Tuesday without a lot of stress. So how do we give ourselves permission?
Did you eat any sugar or
Yes.
any alcohol? What could you got this
All these
chance for
rules.
right? These rules, you're not following.
You're not following them. So am I doing enough or am I overdoing it? So I think there's the other stress of like, oh my gosh, I'm running. I didn't use this experience to put life into perspective. I'm right back to the rat race. I'm working, this many hours a day, and I'm juggling and shuttling people everywhere. And oh my gosh, I'm right back into perhaps some of the stressors that I worry caused this, or I'm struggling with anxiety and fear. And what is that wreaking havoc? So all that internal dialogue can all
And that can all come into
Feel
this
guilt.
category that you're calling survivor's guilt, but really can be guilt around a number of
am I doing enough? Am I not doing
That's a
enough?
little different.
How are
too
others?
much,
Yeah.
not enough. I didn't start with other ones either.
Yes.
Somebody and, I'm not.
Writing a book.
Writing a book.
I'm not doing every parade and wearing every ribbon. I don't really even want to wear a ribbon if I'm honest. Like all that, people kind of, where is this in my identity? How do I understand it? Yeah, that's survivor's
That's
guilt.
September.
Yeah,
Then
and everyone has different places where they feel that way for themselves. Okay, so that's September. Then we've got October, shifting focus, the relationship with your body.
That's a big thing. Hardly anyone comes, they get put on the conveyor belt of cancer treatment, and then they get dropped off the other end, and there's a lot of difference in how someone looks. And especially, every different cancer, but especially early stage breast cancer is found with a mammogram. You have 0 symptoms, you're healthy and fit, and then we put you on the treatment conveyor belt. We give you a bunch of poison, we take away your estrogen, we zap you with some radiation after we have done some disfiguring surgery. We drop you off the other end, having experienced all of those, slowed down your metabolism, and in the process, 80% of women have gained weight too. It's like, all of this and I gained 20 pounds?
Yeah, and then yay, you did it.
Oh, but you should be so thankful because we cured your cancer.
Yeah, so then people feel a bit in a prison of silence sometimes. I call it a prison of silence with their body. If this was a big enough deal, my doctor would raise it with me. And then the doctor might be thinking, if this were really bothering them, my patient would say something. So both are kind of waiting for the other person to say something about it. And then we're left with, gosh, I feel quite a lot of weakness and fatigue. I don't have the same muscle strength that I used to have, or my body doesn't look, I've gained weight, my metabolism is different, my sexuality is different. So those things, fertility for young women is different. Hair comes back and it doesn't look the way it did when you lost it. So skin.
Hair, nails, skin, body shape.
Scars. You maybe went into this with a nice, clean palette and you came out with scars or changes in that, even if it's private and you're the only one seeing your body, you feel different about it. Let alone, that's all visual, let alone a common feeling of betrayal. That my body betrayed me, it let me down. How do we re-befriend our body and kind of be a team again? So there's a lot of the relationship with your body.
Right. And so in our integrative oncology program, we have some I wouldn't say necessarily solutions, but some practices and
Support.
providers and support to address all of those. You mentioned sexual function. You're exactly right. The studies time and time again have shown that professional caregivers don't ask. They think that the patient will say it. If they've got a problem, the patient goes, I don't know if I can bring this up, but I guess they'll ask me if they feel like they can talk about it. And so there's the conspiracy of silence, and no one talks about it. So it's one of the things that we address in our survivorship clinic, and not just address do you have sexual dysfunction, vaginal dryness, pain with intercourse, but that we have means of addressing that. So fortunately, we have a GYN who specializes in menopause and sexual health, and that's a good resource, because you can't just give a breast cancer patient estrogen and make it all better. So, and
I'm so glad to know that too. I will remember that when I'm doing that group.
Yeah.
I'll be like, refer back. Yeah.
And as you know, I mean, you can address a mind, body, spirit. I mean, and part of it also is how do you address it with your partner? Assuming you have a monogamous relationship with someone.
Well, and it the reason I chose the title "Relationship with Your Body" is that we have to rebuild our personal and independent relationship with our body before we begin to share it with someone else. And that could mean in any way, whether that is just being able to put on shorts and go out in the summertime in a tank top because your body feels different, or in romantic parenting with a partner. So in many different ways, how do we begin to rebuild our relationship?
That's
Yeah.
October.
Okay, so that's October. November. Oh, this one we kind of I think and about what's happening in November. Oh, Thanksgiving is happening in November. The beginning of getting together with people is happening in November as we approach the holiday season. So November is the good, the bad, and the ugly relationships after cancer. So we just talked about a relationship you have with your body. Now we're going to talk about relationships you have with other people. And that kind of falls in a spectrum of like the people that are in our inner circle that get us and love us and are just like say all the right things, to the people who might be on the periphery and touch uncomfortable. So how do we navigate being in relationships? And do we talk about cancer? Do we not talk about cancer? If you don't want to talk about cancer, what else do you talk about? All that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, and there's no right or wrong, but the role of being a cancer, having had cancer, let's say being a cancer survivor, and we use that term to mean someone who's in the middle of treatment, done with treatment, cancer-free, or living with cancer. But how does someone incorporate that into their identity? How does someone incorporate being a doctor? I mean, do I lead with the fact that every time I meet somebody, hi, I'm Dr. Deming?
Yeah.
Do you lead with everything like, oh, hi, I've had cancer?
Yeah.
And at what point does it become like a main focus? If you show up with no hair and as a woman, sometimes it's so obvious you have to lead with it. I mean, if I show up in the office with a white coat and stethoscope and it's a patient expecting to see a doctor, I lead with I'm a doctor. I don't always do that at the gym or something, but same with the cancer survivor. And at what point in getting to know someone does it become a part of your identity that you feel is such a part of your identity, you disclose it, and when do you want to just forget about it and hope nobody ever finds out?
Or step into another, because you're talking about it just even with you, right? That we all have many different pieces of ourselves. And where do you go for different parts of your identity or your need, right? So in this space, I am a daughter, I am a mother, I am a friend. In this space, I am a professional, and I behave differently in different spaces. So it's a little bit that mind. I think that our feelings, a lot of survivors have their feelings hurt at times by relationships that didn't show up in ways that they expected. Other relationships come out of the woodwork and feel really profoundly grateful for or change. I had a really kind of important, significant moment in one of these groups where a woman was in the group and she felt very hurt by a girlfriend that was not there for her for cancer. And then she went on to say, 6 years after my cancer diagnosis, I got a divorce. And that friend was the most amazing friend to me at that time. So it also kind of helps us to stop and think, the people in our lives might be suited for different moments in our life, right? This may not work. And that's because everybody has their own stories and their own stuff. So we have to also give grace and allow our relationships to evolve and ebb and flow and change. And so that's that. That's going to be what we talk about in my group.
That's relationships in
November.
November.
Oh, and then I love December. You're going to love December. You're going to love it. So December is self-compassion, the gift we give ourselves. So we think of December as a gift-giving season. And so self-compassion, the gift you give yourself.
And say more about that. How would you define self-compassion? And do you think that you can truly be compassionate to others if you don't have some sense of self-compassion?
Maybe yes and no.
Right.
I think that we can be beautifully kind to others in ways that we beat ourselves up and have a sense of negative self-talk to ourselves. In fact, that's something that I say in my office, is this inner voice that you're saying, is it what you would say to someone in your spirit?
Right.
No. So I think sometimes we are quite generous and caring to others and don't extend the same compassion to ourselves.
Sure. So obviously self-compassion is not the same as narcissism.
Not the same as narcissism. No, it is not. You are allowed to have that gift and to care for yourself. Yes.
And that, that a compassionate person should, just as they would want to reach out to someone in suffering, not just to empathetically understand their suffering, but to compassionately try to relieve their suffering.
Well, and to accept. Compassion, self-compassion is also waking up in the morning and saying, I'm not at my best today. I'm not at my best. I am filled with dread and I'm overwhelmed. And because I'm not at my best, I have to take compassionate authority and care for myself. The analogy I sometimes give in my office, I did today with a patient, is if you were driving down 235 and it was pouring rain, I sure hope you'd slow down and turn on your windshield wipers. We wouldn't keep going 70 miles an hour. You would recognize, okay, these are very difficult driving conditions, and we would manage our expectations and we would shift gears. So then why, when we wake up in the morning and we feel heaviness and your scan is tomorrow, so you're filled with that scan anxiety and you're not quite at your best, do you think you're really going to function the same way at work? You think you're going to parent with the same grace and patience? No, you're not. You're not operating with the same amount. You're not on all 8 cylinders today. So we've got to have compassion and care, take authority over that. So that's kind of that.
It's December.
That's December, and that's all we got.
And that concludes. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the difference between sitting in the room with someone 3 feet away and conducting this case.
Oh. Well, there are differences. I think that kind of, frankly, the pandemic changed our whole comfort level and maybe ease with being on a camera and being in a room. I don't know if you can tell that I have a lot of energy. I have a lot of energy. I talk with my hands. I think that translates well for me across the screen, and I can kind of go in and grab. I'm a pretty active therapist in the space, so I think that all works. I think that being remote has the opportunity to connect with more people, reach more.
Right.
So there are people who have a hard time traveling a distance for the support that they need. They are, whether that is geographically or physically, emotionally, mentally, they can't, get where they need to go. And so we can bring that support right where you are. And not only professional support, but also the room, the group of people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that can be really great, good.
And I think that one of the great things about this is that we do have the ability then for those who may need it and want it to follow up the series with some individuals,
Absolutely.
which could either be in person or remote. But
Absolutely.
you're right, the ability to reach more people. I suspect that some people will, their mode might be to quietly sit and just absorb everything, and that they may not be the first ones to give the examples, but they may gain a lot from
I
listening.
say that, and there's always a place for a listener. We need that. In fact, if you're one of the ones who talks, you're counting on somebody listening. So we always have space for a listener. I also recognize that it may feel uncomfortable for people to speak, so that chat is always open. And as I do these groups, sometimes the conversation is big, and sometimes my chat is flying. And I say as we begin the group, hey, I'm gonna sometimes read the chat. If it feels super wonky and weird for you to have me read your words, just interrupt me and take over. But if you put something in the chat, I might say, hey, I'm seeing that Jane is talking about Jane. Jane, would you be willing to say more? So I do that to kind of bring, and it just becomes a very fluid conversation.
Right. And that's taken a bit of experience on your part with Zoom to kind of feel how to do that, how to incorporate the chat versus the, just people sending you a message just to yourself, or they send it to the group, and how do you manage that?
Reply to everybody with a private message.
Right.
Yeah. Oops. No. It's fine. But we've done it enough now that, or I've done, this is the beginning for this one, but I've done it enough that it works.
So one of the things that I'm sure you experience, I experience all the time, is just being in the room with someone, listening compassionately, asking questions, being present, may not even require a touch. And you might even be going over some news that is not great news, but that after a compassionate encounter that may not have any touch or cancer killing treatment, patients will often say, I feel so much better. Clearly, there's this process of being in the room that has tremendous impact. I don't discount that it can happen over the phone or over Zoom. So I guess my question is, do you think that the power of healing loses something telephonically, that there's something more magical that happens in person, or is
there is something that there are certain cues and there are certain things I can pick up on when I'm sitting with somebody in person. I can say things like, oh my gosh, do you notice how your body is just so different as you talk to me about your kids? Do you feel that? I'm seeing it in you as you do this. And it's very different than just a second ago when you were talking about this. You notice that I can point that out and have people see those things. I do that online too. I think sometimes the value of therapy, I'm not a doctor, so my work as therapist, I think that there is a benefit to therapy, many different things. So that could be learning strategy and skill and sharpening self-awareness. That could be that piece. But sometimes my space is just bearing witness and holding space. And so I know I can do that online too. And just with the way in which I listen and the way in which I respond can help people feel seen.
I find I do some Zoom and telehealth. It's always easier if I have met the person, like an established patient. Then it seems like our telehealth connection is pretty much 95% of what would be in the room. But it's those patients that you haven't had the chance to meet in person that I feel like I'm not connecting with them as much. And
you do feel that. It's a hurdle to feel more human. Like I think it's easier to feel human in first face to face. But I feel like, I don't know how you feel, but the trajectory of my career, again, I graduated in 2004, so I've been doing this for 20 years. It's one thing. You don't have to tell me.
44 years ago.
But I think about when I first graduated, there was this thought that I had to be like perfectly boundaried and professional and no part of me entered the room. It was all about the other person. And as I've done this, that is not the case at all. You very much get me in the room. I am very human in there. I'm not telling you about my children
Right.
or my Rocket history, which is why you never knew about that. I'm not saying any of that, but I am very real, and that translates in online
I don't
too.
think you can be truly authentic if there's not some exchange of.
Yes.
I mean, I would never think of asking somebody, where did you grow up, without being willing to say
Yeah.
where I grew up, if they would ask.
Mhm.
I'm not there to give them a 10-minute biography of mine. I'm not their 10-minute biography, even if they're going to say, okay, I grew up in Hawaii. Where'd you grow up?
Yeah. Feeling connected, feeling like you have some rapport, giggling about something.
When did you first do something like a Let's Talk series?
So I've done a lot of different webinars and still do that for like cancer conferences that are happening online or like a one-off programming, whatever. And then I would say I have been doing one for ovarian cancer patients through the organization Share, which is lovely. I love that organization, Share, since before 2020. So probably 5 years. And it's grown so much. And the women in that group come again and again and again. So we are all over the country. In fact, there's a woman that logs in from Australia. So we're coming from all over the world, but they come again and again.
And how many might you have
Um,
on a conference? I mean, there must
so
be a certain size.
We now
at
have a
which-
spreadsheet that shows topics, attendance, whatever, and we get feedback. So we can say, hey, these are the topics that drive a huge number. These are the topics that, like, in other words, we know that fear of recurrence always drives. No wonder that that's the one I first chose here, because it always draws a huge number of people. And I would say for Share, I've had up to 80 people in the room, and we're all talking. You're able to use your microphone and go and navigate that. And there are people that talk less. There's a chat that's going. So just navigating that and working it. But then on other groups, 20.
Another question, what's the difference in your experience? Are there any sort of universal or between counseling men and women? And is it difficult to do a combo of men and women in the same room? And what would be your preference?
I think, I don't want to overgeneralize,
Right.
but sometimes, and when I think about, I'll get to the group and how to navigate both of that, but in my office, either men come in ready to spill it because they haven't spilled it anywhere else. And so they're like, whoa, and there it is, and all of it comes out. And I'm like, here we are, 5 minutes in, and we are, there we go. Or the reverse of that. There's a lot of dancing and maneuvering. And in fact, I had a man that I met with first thing this morning. And he goes through the rigmarole. He checks the boxes. This is what's happening. And I said, so where's the sticky stuff? Where do you need to talk about? You don't talk about anywhere else. I have to drive it a little. So sometimes I do that with certain women though too. So it's just personality. I would say in the group, because I facilitated a lot of groups, both remotely and face-to-face, part of my role as a facilitator is watching the room and helping manage monopolizing, helping to make sure everyone is feeling connected and heard, but also watching when I get a cue, like whether it's a eyes light up and I'm like, oh, Jenny, you look like you might have had something. Did I miss that? Or if you don't, you don't. But I just noticed that you kind of set up on that one. And then, so I just check in. I do a little of that to make sure that everybody has space. I just want to make sure everybody. Male, female, I think sometimes, again, not to be too gendered, but sometimes men feel a great responsibility to having it together and protecting the people that they love around them. Women do that too. Teens do that a lot too. They protect their parents. But, I want to be strong for not only myself, but also my wife. She's really worried and anxious. So I got it. So, but then in my office, it's the place where you can let down and be scared and be worried.
And when you're in a group session, how do you handle someone who does want to talk too much and thinks that, okay, there's 40 people here, but they think this is a one-on-one session?
It's a delicate maneuver.
It is.
It's a delicate maneuver.
Like mute?
No, I've never done that. I do weave in there. I'm like, Jane, that you. Yeah, he's got such a great insight and awareness. I'm wondering, I noticed that Janet, you had your hand up. Was there something that you were yeah. Yeah. But then what I found sometimes is I might be feeling that way as a facilitator.
Right, but the group is
The
just
group
loving it.
is happy. The group is like really like loving Jane and everything that Jane has to say. So I always have to like watch, is the room also getting tired or is it just me? Yeah.
What topic is left out of that list?
Oh, we have so many. So at this point I have like a huge library
Okay.
because I've done this forever and ever. So the other ones that I think get a lot of attention and that people are like what? I'm doing one for Shara called Building Better Patient-Provider Relationships. So that's an important one. Like what does it look like? How do we build a relationship with you? What are you needing? Because you need certain data. What is, how do we do that work? Kind of creating a toolbox of care tools. Toxic positivity, I do that one a lot. Grief and loss, when the other shoe drops. So when you hear the news of a recurrence, those are all topics. I mean, there's a number of them.
Well, let's open up to questions here. So we have a live studio audience, and they'll get first shot at you. But we also have a live streaming audience. So if you're live streaming, please put your question in the comment section, and we'll get to them. But we'll start here with our audience. Boone.
Yes. Do you do a session on
Chemo brain? No.
well, one of them was on caregivers,
Yes.
and the other was side effects after cancer.
So I've done groups. I've not done a let's talk about it about caregivers because all of my audiences have been survivors, right? But in conferences where I go speak, I've done caregiver often. And I find that to be a very confidential room because there are conversations the caregivers need to have and to be able to vocalize and speak about that they don't want their loved one to know that they sometimes feel, but it's normal and okay to feel. And how do you get support in many different places for yourself? So caregiver support is critical. It's very important. Side effects, I tend to focus on specific side effects. So back to other topics, I've done one sick and tired of being sick and tired, and it's all about fatigue. And there's many types of fatigue. There's physical fatigue, there's emotional fatigue, there's weakness, there's many types of fatigue. So how do we think about fatigue, understand what we're experiencing, and then when we do that, we figure out. I've done a thing on chemo brain and brain fog. Tools and tactics. A lot of that's executive function, so you can get a lot of that data. When we just look at the concept of neuro, psychology and executive function, where do we grab some of that?
Angelina.
Hi. I find it so intriguing about how, my original major was going to go into counseling, psychology, and I did a lot of skits with people, not skits, we either chose to present a problem or real problem or make up one, and then we had to learn how to cue in on body language and all that. But then I switched over to child development and family studies, so I was a preschool teacher, but I took that knowledge and do that. So it intrigues me, how does this work for you when you do Zoom to catch that? Because what I learned is that you have to watch the whole body language, and a lot of people just from the shoulder up, you're going to see that much of them. Is it more relying on their facial to get more from them?
I get to know people. I mean, so ultimately I see people more than once, right? So I get to know them over the course of time. Also for me as a therapist, and I say this in first sessions all the time, I say, I'm gonna say things back to you just as an effort to better understand you. And if I get it wrong, you have full permission to correct me. So I will often in therapy, whether I'm remote or I'm going to say, what I'm hearing you say is that when this is happening, this is really frustrating you. Am I getting it right? Or I guess maybe what I'm gathering from what you're saying is that it's incredibly overwhelming. Is that hitting it? So I'm often kind of like decoding or naming it and then allowing them the ability to be like, it's not quite that. It's a little bit more this. So it's a lot of this.
Got it.
Yes, what would a lack of fear of reoccurrence indicate? Would it be just unawareness, or have you buried something, or?
So you're not really feeling that sense of
Never.
overwhelm or uncertainty or
Dr.
fear.
Deming says, hey, you're cancer-free, that's great.
Well, I mean, how long has it been since you finished treatment? Do you mind my asking?
4 years.
4 years. Okay. So I think that over time the feelings can change, right? And that's okay. And sometimes we also feel a great deal of, managing fear of recurrence is often finding evidence to the contrary, right? Like being a little lawyer and being like, oh, you have cancer. No, I don't, because I've got, these are the evidence that I don't. I am feeling strong. I have got scans that prove that there's no evidence of disease. My hair is growing back. So you might be very squarely situated in what's working. That's great.
Yeah, and to expand on that, it's kind of like where you learn how to drive and you're terrified. The idea that you can go 65 miles an hour on a 4-lane and just terrifying. And then after a few years, you don't even think about the risk of accidents that can happen. And so we adjust to fears, and many individuals have a type of cancer where we are able to say the chance that your cancer is going to come back is 5%, and if it's going to come back, it's likely to happen in the first 2 years. And so the rational, intelligent thing is after a couple of years, it's the appropriate response to not even worry about it, that it's so highly likely to be cured. For individuals where you just finished treatment, and not speaking for you, but most people do have some concern every time they get that first scan or the second scan. But every scan that turns out good, especially for those who have a type of cancer, that if it's going to come back, it's usually going to come back in the first couple of years, then the natural response that is intelligent and matches the statistics is that you don't have an overwhelming fear of recurrence. With patients that I see 20, 30 years out for breast cancer, some share with me that every time they get a mammogram, even 20, 30 years later, there's a little bit of fear of recurrence, but most would say that each year it's a little less than that first mammogram after having undergone cancer treatment. What's your experience with that?
I would say the same. I would say you watch people learn how to navigate that feeling or that thought or whatever you want to call it lives on their shelf. I know where to put that. I know how to navigate it. I know how to deal with it. Yeah. Sometimes people use, or I sometimes give them the idea. I say, hey, what about this? Is it when they feel that, how does that reframe or recenter them on their values, on what matters to you? So every time you feel that prick of fear or worry, see it, name it, and then how does it recenter you back on the perspective that you want to hold on to for your life, right? So, you can do many different things with it. You might be just navigating that on your own. If you were in my office, you're not in my office right now, I would be like, you said to me, I think your words were, is it a problem?
Is there something wrong with
Is
me?
there a problem?
Did I bury it?
Is there a problem that I don't feel fear of recurrence? If you're in my office, I would say, do you think it's a problem? Because that's what therapists do. do you think it's a problem? Because then therein lies perhaps the wonder, the worry, right? Do you think it's a problem? If you think it's a problem, why do you think it's a problem? Yeah. Chew on that question.
Yes, George.
Julie, I'm just wondering if you have to set parameters with your practice, boundaries, for lack of a better description, maybe a disclaimer for people that might come in with unreal expectations. True, you're going to help with their mental health mostly, but if they come in thinking that you're going to cure their cancer, although what you provide can help mitigate the symptoms. So, I mean, how do you tread that?
Well, I'm going to take your question and think about it. And how I navigate, what I find is that maybe people don't think they're going to cure their cancer. I think there might be awareness that I'm not a medical doctor nor a miracle worker, right? But I do think that sometimes what people walk into therapy thinking that I am magically going to take away all of their fear, worry, anxiety, and uncomfortable feelings. That now that I've started therapy, hurrah, good for me, I will now never worry or fear or having this really difficult, uncomfortable anxiety again. And the truth is, I can't do that. I don't have anything in my drawers. I don't have anything that I'm going to give you that's going to take away that feeling, nor is that appropriate because those feelings serve a purpose and have a role. But I think that realistically, how do we live and find meaning and purpose and connection and joy with those feelings in the background? So how do we live in the presence, maybe, of a degree of loss or the feeling of worry? And sometimes people are like, that's not like what I want to do. So then that's grief. How do we come through the process of sadness and acceptance? That's a possibility.
Do you ever have patients that want you to get involved with solving their problems? Could you call my husband and tell him? Could you talk to my doctor and tell him that he just doesn't listen to me?
I say, I'm so sorry that your doctor is not hearing you. And it sounds like your husband is not understanding you. Let's together right now think of the words that you might use that might help you to feel heard. So what could you say? We go through, we do create, so people actually, I get paper out and I'm like, okay, write it down there. Can you say it again?
Say it again.
Can you, and then I think I say, I think what I'm hearing you say is that you're needing to feel understood. And that if he did X, Y, and Z, it would lead you to have that need met. So how do we say that in the room? Yeah.
Next question.
I've just got a question about someone that has a diagnosis of incurable cancer, and they're looking for a therapist to give them a project, to give them a course study, to get them involved, but they know they're a goner, or they feel like they are. What do you think of that? If they didn't go to a therapist, it might be, fixing up an old car or finishing a song or something like that. I mean, how do you do it?
In my office right now, I'm thinking of someone that is like that. And when we talk about that, it's about legacy. So the work that he is doing is meaningful to him, and he spends time on that when he feels capable of it, with the hope that it becomes a piece of his legacy. So and I say those words straight out in the room. So sometimes also when you're dealing with somebody with a chronic illness, the places where you can talk about the end of your life feel sacred. And we will talk about that. How, when we think about your dying or the experience, what do you hope for? When you're no longer here, what do you want people to think of you? And those are big questions that not a lot of people say. And so to have an hour to spend on that, people feel incredibly great. And whether they're end of life or not, to say, let's talk, when you get to the end of your life, how do you want that to go? What matters to you? Let's just go there. Now let's remember that it's August 7th and we're not there. So we just touched base on that and we talked about that and what that really you hope for yourself. So that means that hope is going to follow you all the way to the end. But now let's come back here to August 7th.
So one of the things I'm wondering, to what extent do you use the word joy? So we all know people who want to live forever but don't have a clue what they could do this afternoon to bring joy to their life or bring joy to somebody else's life. So I personally think that it's a important project of human beings to contemplate what brings joy to your life. And obviously I'm talking about this deep-seated, or Aristotelian eudaimonia joy, not just pleasure, but the joy that includes sorrow and suffering and ups and downs and twists and turns. And to what extent, so often I will say to my patients when I meet them, what has brought you the most joy since we last met? And if they can't think of anything, I try to prompt them, what does a good day? What does joy? And usually people find that they really do know things that can make them joyful. Whether it's spending time with their grandchildren, whether it's spending time with their dog, whether it's being out on a nature hike, whether it's, a phone call, or helping somebody else along the way. Is there a time and place for that in your
I
counseling?
think always, yeah. I think we have to live our full experience, right? So it's both the stuff that's not comfortable and the other stuff. And what's not working is so doggone loud in the room. So how do we turn up the volume on what is working? I will often, it's not always my broken record. I think I say that every single let's talk about it. It's how I begin all of my therapy begins with self-awareness. So how do we know what you're experiencing? How do we know how to care for you without knowing how you are? So a lot of times, like the first homework that I give, or the first thing that I say between now and the next time I see you, I want you to just notice yourself. Just stop and just every so often just check in. How am I doing? Like, and not only notice, oh, I'm impatient right now. I'm feeling alone because I get exhausted. I'm feeling really kind of sad and lonely. Or I'm feeling quite calm and content. Like, can you just begin to notice yourself? And then when you're feeling calm, content, maybe joyful, happy, playful, what's happening? So we don't really notice ourselves a lot. We could all do a better job at just noticing.
Yes. Well, this has been wonderful. Our guest has been Julie Larson, licensed clinical social worker, psychotherapist, mental health counselor at the Mercy One Richard Deming Cancer Center, and she is launching Let's Talk About It. It's a virtual monthly session, and you can sign up for it. It is the third Thursday of the month at noon.
Yep.
And if you want to sign up for it, you can go to mercyone.org/RDCC, or you can call our office at 515-358-6606 and sign up for it. It is completely free. It goes over 6 months, 6 different sessions. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it.
And if someone you know would benefit by watching this program, it will be available on demand beginning tomorrow at the Above and Beyond Cancer YouTube channel and the Mercy One Cancer Center website. I hope you join us again next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Julie.